Welcome back. And here we are, starting with the big picture. So what's going on? And behind the big picture, we need data, and we need experts with enough wisdom to make sense of the data. So we are going right away with Nicolas Boyon. He works for Ipsos, and as you know, Ipsos is one of the top research companies in the world, and they have a super interesting research. They have many, but this one, the one we are talking about today, is all focused on happiness. And they've been exploring happiness during COVID, before and during COVID, and of course after. I guess that they're gonna keep going, and we want to learn about what's really going on. Are there key drivers to happiness under pandemic situations? And here we have Nicolas. Welcome.
Hi.
It's fantastic to have you here. Thank you so
Well,
much for joining.
well, thank you, Luis, and hello, everyone. I'm really honored to be with you today. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to take part in this event. So as you mentioned it, Luis, I'll be sharing with you the results of a global survey on happiness that Ipsos conducted this year. I hope that you will find that it provides relevant insights and maybe some perspective as you explore the importance of belonging. I assume that you will be loading the presentation,
Yeah,
and I will share with you the findings.
fantastic.
Uh,
And I will leave you with the findings, and then I come back, and I would love to go into a couple of questions after that. So thank you. Let's
Great.
go.
Okay. So I assume you have the presentation. If not, I can load it, but it's probably best if you can put it on the screen.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So if you can put in presentation mode, that's perfect. Great. Okay. So next slide. So I'm speaking to you today from the office of Ipsos in New York, where I live. Yeah, so as Luis mentioned it, you may know Ipsos from our opinion polls. We're a leading market research and opinion firm with 18,000 full-time employees in 90 countries. And each year we conduct over 50 million interviews of citizens, consumers, all types of stakeholders for more than 5,000 clients. Now, one of the things that I specialize in is international opinion research. And happiness, or I should say self-reported happiness, and that's an important point, is among the many topics that we measure. And since 2011, we have regularly conducted surveys to find out where in the world people are happiest or least happy, and what makes them happy. So next slide. This year, in July and August, we interviewed 20,000 adults, online adults, I should say, in 27 countries. And we asked them the same two questions as we had in past surveys with the same methodology and mostly in the same countries. So we had actually conducted the survey already 5 times before since 2011. So we are able to actually track the results over time and identify trends, and very importantly this year, see how the situation has evolved compared to the pre-pandemic era, which really is only last year. So next. The So one of the two questions that we asked is meant to measure the self-reported level of happiness. So it is taking all things together. Would you say that you are very happy, rather happy, not very happy, or not happy at all? Very simple question. And next is the key findings. So you can see on this map here, the 27 countries where we conducted the survey, and on average across all these countries, 63% of all adults say that they are either very happy or rather happy. The two countries with the highest levels of reported happiness this year are China and the Netherlands, with 93% and 87% respectively describing themselves as very or rather happy. Next come Saudi Arabia at 80%. Still, let's stay here. France and Canada both at 78%. And then a little bit lower, we have Australia, Great Britain, Sweden, Germany, Belgium, and at 70%, the United States. So these are the countries that are sort of above average. At the other end of the spectrum, fewer than half of all adults surveyed in Peru, only 32%, in Chile, 35%, in Spain, 38%, Argentina, 43%, Hungary, 45%, and Mexico, 46%, say that they are happy, which is significantly lower than the global average. And we'll see is also, in most cases, lower than it was in the past. So now let's move to the next slide. It's a little bit crowded, I realize, because we have 27 countries. Here you see that on average, so that's the first bar at the top, the global average. So 11% say they are very happy, and 52% say they are rather happy. So that adds up to the total of 63% that I mentioned before. So really, the high end, the top box, is relatively small, only 11% globally. So the other 39%, the other 37%, say that they're either not very happy, that's 31%, or not happy at all. There's only 6% of all. Now, the countries with the highest proportion of people who are very happy are Saudi Arabia, 30%, India, 22%, and the Netherlands at 20%. The countries where we have the highest prevalence of adults who say they are not happy at all, so really the bottom box, are Spain at 13%, Argentina, and Chile, both at 12%. So double the global average. The next, so obviously 2020 has been a very unusual year. People's lives have been completely disrupted all over the world because of the pandemic. And yet, compared to 2019, globally, if we average all countries, we see very little change. In fact, the overall percentage of people saying that they're very or rather happy on a global average is only 1 percentage point lower than last year. But this actually hides major differences across countries. So there are 6 countries where where self-reported happiness has actually increased compared to last year, and by 5 points or more, which is really significant. So these are most of all China, Russia, Malaysia, and Argentina. In all cases, the percentage of people who say they're happy has gone up by about 10 percentage points compared with last year. Turkey and Italy are in the lot too, a little bit lower. And then we actually have a lot more countries where the incidence of happiness has gone down. There are 12 countries where it's gone down by 5 percentage points, but we see dramatic drops in a number of them. I think the most stunning drops are seen in Peru. We see a drop of 26 percentage points. So last year, 60% of Peruvians, 58% of Peruvians said they were happy, and this year it's down to 32. That's a dramatic drop. And we see something similar, not to the same extent, but also very steep in Chile. We see a drop of 15 points, and we see also major drops in Mexico, 13 points, India, 11 points. And actually, the U.S. comes next, and on Australia are down 9 points. But it's really striking to see such a steep drop in Peru, in Chile, and Mexico. Now, I don't have an explanation for the changes in every country, but clearly, the factors that drive the change, they vary, but they're a mix of the general economic climate, the social and economic impact of the pandemic, and also political stability or strife at the time of the survey. Remember, the survey was conducted in the summer, or actually, in the case of Peru and Chile, in the winter. But the mix varies from country to country, and I'll get back to that a little bit later. So next. Globally, and that's a really important point here, that globally, the prevalence of happiness this year is virtually unchanged from last year, but the long-term trend is really negative. If you compare with 2011 and 2013, we see that the global prevalence of happiness, so based on very large samples, on about 20,000 interviews each time, that we see a 14-point drop across the past decade, and it's been a steady drop. It was actually lower than it is today in 2017, but 2017 is a little bit of an outlier because there were some small but possibly important methodological differences with the previous and the subsequent surveys. So the 2011, 2013, 2018, 2019, and 2020 surveys are absolutely identical in their methodology, and they're really apples to apples. So that really means that there is undeniably a decline, a steady decline in self-reported happiness globally. And if we look at the next slide, we see that this drop that we see at a global level is actually observed in every country, with one exception being China. It's not statistically significant in a number of them, like Saudi Arabia, Great Britain, Germany, or it's very small, but it's very, very notable in many countries. In fact, it's down by at least 5 points in 17 of the 23 countries that we have surveyed back in 2011 and in 2020. So over the course of 9 years, we see very significant drops in most countries. As I mentioned it, actually, before I go to this, I wanted to actually highlight some countries where we see drops of 20 points or more, and these are Mexico, Turkey, South Africa, Argentina, Spain, and India. We had not surveyed Peru back or Chile back in 2011, so I can't speak for them. Also, we had not covered the Netherlands, which is very high this time, so I can't talk about the trends in those countries. But you see that in the countries that I just mentioned, self-reported happiness is done by a great deal. And yeah, the only exception to all this is China, which actually shows a steady increase over time, and now it's 15 points higher than it was in 2011. Now, the work that we do at Ipsos on consumer confidence, it's actually a program that I lead myself, so I'm very familiar with it. This work on consumer sentiment shows that it has increased in China more than in any other country during the past decade. And at the same time, many of the countries that show big drops in reported happiness are the countries that show the biggest drop in consumer confidence over that period. So clearly, there's a strong relationship between economic sentiment and reported happiness. But this said, I think there are other factors, and I'll single out the US for this. In the US, we see a 15-point drop over the past 9 years, but actually, there's been a 9-point drop since last year, and we believe it's largely due to the pandemic. However, we still had seen a 6-point drop between 2011 and 2019. But at the same time, consumer confidence in the US really went up a lot. It increased to a very large extent, not quite to the same extent as China, but pretty close. But in the US, at the same time, other research that we do on topics like loneliness, like mental illness, shows that there's been a spike in self-reported loneliness, in reports of poor mental health. So I think that this points to fundamental social and health issues driving the drop in happiness to a certain extent in some countries. So, I do not have an answer to the causes for every country, but it's clearly a mix. And I think this data is probably more, we're putting it out there so we can actually start a discussion on what the causes are. So next, the drop that I was mentioning to you and the causes for the shift, brings us to the second question that we asked. Actually, the 29 other questions, because we asked for 29 possible sources of happiness, whether it gives you the greatest happiness, some happiness, it doesn't make you happy or happier, or it doesn't even apply to you. And so if you look at the next bar chart on this slide here, this graph here lists all 29 potential sources of happiness that we asked about. And we have asked about each one of them since 2011, with the possible exception of one or two that we added over time. So we have a lot of data that I will not be able to share with you today, but you can access it. You can access a full report on our website where you can see the trends for each one of these, and you'll be able to also see how the data applies to each one of the countries that we've surveyed. Here on this graph, the 29 sources of happiness are ranked according to the percentage of people globally who say that it gives them the greatest happiness. And at the top, what you see is my health and physical well-being. 55% of people globally say that it provides them the greatest happiness. Then next, we see my relationship with my spouse or partner, 49%. My children, also 49%. And feeling that my life has meaning at 48%. So the top four drivers of happiness, or self-reported drivers of happiness, pertain to health, relationships, and purpose. And interestingly enough, at the very bottom, dead last, is time spent on social media, only 11%. And so what we see is people don't think that it makes them happy. It doesn't mean that they don't spend a lot of time on social media. We know they do, but most people don't feel that it actually gives them much happiness. In fact, more people say that it doesn't provide them with any happiness than anything else. So we'll go back to this in detail. So next, let's have a look at how these sources of happiness have changed since the pre-pandemic era, or at least compared to last year. Now, globally, we don't see much change in the percentage of people who derive the greatest happiness from any of the 29 items. In fact, for 21 of the 29 sources of happiness that we studied, the change is insignificant. It's between +1% and -1%. So it's very, very steady, which actually speaks to the stability from year to year, speaks to the validity of the instrument, but it also shows that overall the pandemic has not really impacted what people look at as giving them the greatest happiness, although there are a few exceptions. And you can see the table at the top here. 4 items in green. They're the ones that have shown an increase of at least of 2 points. And then you see 4 items in red, and there are those that show a decrease of 2 or 3 points. Now, those in green, um, pertain really to connecting with others and with self-esteem. The amount of time or money that I donate to charity and help others, being forgiven for something that I did, or being recognized as a successful person, which really speaks more to self-esteem, and then finding someone to be with, which really is about relationship. So during the pandemic, these have become much more important to a small number of people. And then we see 4 items that have dropped in importance. And these really only relate to money and time. My hobbies, having more money, the amount of free time that I have, and my personal financial situation. And that could be because the lockdowns and other restrictions that are associated with controlling the pandemic have led people to spend less and have more free time on their hand than they care for. And these people being stuck at home and being limited in what they could do, really were striving for, for meaning in their life, and for for relationships. These people may have dealt with loneliness and isolation. So which brings us to the table below, which really which here is about what gives me at least some happiness. And so the sources of really any happiness have actually increased. Almost every single one of the 29 items has gone up in terms of giving people at least some happiness compared with the pandemic. But I singled out the 5 that went up by at least 4 percentage points. And I think they're quite interesting because, again, they clearly pertain to health, to security, and to relationships. The top one is being forgiven for something that I did, which really speaks to about feeling good about yourself. Then there's my health and physical well-being, which is very understandable in the context of the pandemic. My personal safety and security, same thing. And again, forgiving someone for something they did, which really is the flip side of the coin about being forgiven, which really speaks to connecting with others, and then finding someone to be with. So all of this is actually very consistent and shows the importance of less material things in life as people go through a very unusual and difficult situation. And so next, I would like to walk you through how things look across the 27 countries that we surveyed. So what's clear is that the top 5 sources of greatest happiness at the global level are truly universal. Each one of them, my health or physical well-being, my relationship with my spouse or partner, my children, feeling that life has meaning, and my living conditions, all 5 of them are in the top 10, are among the top 10 sources of greatest happiness in all or almost all of the 27 countries. So they're truly universal. Now, next, as we go down the list, we start seeing sources of happiness that matter more in some countries than they do globally. So here you have the sources of happiness that rank between number 6 and number 10 globally. But some of them are actually in the top 3 of some countries. And that's the case of my personal safety and security in Argentina, in China, Mexico, Peru, Saudi Arabia. Feeling in control of my life in South Africa and Turkey. Having a meaningful job or employment. And that's big in Brazil, in Chile, in India, in Italy, and Peru. And then having more money in Chile, France, and South Korea. That speaks more to the economic concerns that we see in these countries. And then on the next slide, so it's the middle tier. Next. Yes, thank you. So these are the sources of greatest happiness, ranking number 11 to number 20 globally. Some of them are in the top 5 of several countries. So my personal financial situation, again, in France and South Korea, but also in Hungary and Russia. My friends, it's actually big in Australia, Belgium, and Great Britain. All countries that actually experience serious lockdowns. My hobbies and interest in Japan, and also the amount of free time in Japan. And that's probably more specific to a country where people work very long hours. Finding someone to be with, Germany, Japan, and Russia. The well-being of my country is unique as a top concern in Argentina, being recognized as a successful person in Turkey, and the state of the economy in South Korea. And then finally, on the next slide, we see the items that rank 21 to 29. So the bottom tier of now. Among them, there are 2 I would like to single out. There's only one in that bottom tier that ranks in the top 5 of any country, and that's my religious and spiritual well-being. It's in the top 5 in Malaysia and Saudi Arabia, but it's also cited by more than 50%, not only in these countries, but also in Brazil and South Africa. So it's actually a case of, it's one of the rare cases where you see really an item or a source of happiness that is more specific to certain countries than others. And finally, I think it's interesting to note that the time spent on social media ranks last in almost every country. So the last thing I wanted to say about what I just presented, and I know we're running out of time, so I'll be quick, is that I listed a number of countries that have specific characteristics. I did not mention the US and Canada. And interestingly, the US and Canada, the ranking in these 2 countries is almost identical to the global ranking, which actually speaks to kind of the fact that even though people tend to think of the US as being exceptional, it is actually very, very representative of the global picture when it comes to social attitudes. And so, in conclusion, happiness has receded in many countries since last year, with really steep drops in Peru, Chile, and Spain, but it's actually gained in some countries like China. The prevalence of happiness overall has declined almost everywhere in the world in the past decade. And the pandemic has affirmed the importance, the primacy of health and physical well-being, security, and relationships as drivers of happiness. So on this, I'll be happy to address any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nicolas. So insightful. So what I would recommend is that if you can stay a bit around on the chat.
Sure.
There are several questions, and there will be many opportunities to keep the interaction. I think, to me, and actually now we are having Dan Tomasolo, who is going to be focusing on hope, something that is very interesting to see here is the evolution that we are going to have after COVID, knowing that health, that security, and I'm very curious to feel forgiven, right? That feeling of I'm doing the right thing, and they look for meaning. I think
Right.
meaning, physical health, security, and forgiveness are really, really amazing drivers, I feel, and I take it, and I recommend people that go deeper into all the insights. But that was fantastic. Thank you so much,
Oh,
Nicolas.
my pleasure. So I'll be happy to address any questions. And if you want to see the full results of the survey, just search Ipsos Happiness Global Survey. You'll have access to the full deck. It's full of data. If you want more.
Congratulations on the work that you are doing, and congratulations to Ipsos for this focus. We are going to put on the chat the link to the survey so everybody get access to it.
Great.
Thank you so much, Nicolas, and congratulations again. So see you soon.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.